Ethan Ward had been driving for 12 straight hours when the rain began to fall. But it wasn't the exhaustion that made his hands tighten on the wheel. It was the figure standing perfectly still beside a black sedan in the empty rest area, watching him through the downpour. The rain had been falling for hours, a steady curtain of water that blurred the edges of the road and made the world beyond my headlights feel distant and unreal. My wipers moved in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, clearing just enough of the windshield for me to keep going, but every mile felt heavier than the last. I'd been driving all night, and fatigue clung to me like the damp air inside the car. My shoulders ached from gripping the steering wheel, and my eyes burned each time I blinked. When the glow of a blue rest area sign appeared through the rain, it felt like a small relief, a pause in the endless darkness of the highway. The sign was old and weather-worn, but its reflective letters shone like a promise of safety. I turned off the exit ramp and followed the short, winding road that led into the parking lot. The asphalt was slick and glossy, reflecting the few dim yellow lights mounted high on poles. The bulbs flickered in the downpour, casting uneven shadows across the wet pavement. The lot was almost empty. There was only one other vehicle, a black sedan, parked far away, near the edge of the tree line. It looked older, with dark-tinted windows and a dull shine to its paint, as if it hadn't been washed in a long time. I noticed it immediately but told myself it was nothing unusual. People stopped at these places at all hours. I chose a spot closer to the building, where I could see the faint glow of the vending machines through the glass doors. I put the car in park and cut the engine. The sudden quiet inside was almost unsettling after hours of listening to the hum of the motor. The rain seemed louder now, drumming against the roof and sliding in long streaks down the windows. My phone sat in the queue folder, but when I picked it up, I saw I had no signal. The small symbol at the top of the screen felt oddly final, as if I'd just been sealed off from the rest of the world. I told myself I'd only stay a few minutes, just enough time to rest my eyes, maybe sip some water before getting back on the road. The exhaustion in my body was beginning to win over the unease in my mind. I leaned back in the seat and let my gaze drift toward the side mirror. That's when I noticed movement in the far corner of the lot. The rain distorted the image, but I could see a figure standing next to the black sedan. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, perfectly still. I couldn't make out any details, but the posture was strange, rigid, unmoving. Their heads seemed angled toward my car, though the rain made it hard to be certain. I sat up straighter, my eyes fixed on the reflection in the mirror. Seconds passed. The figure didn't move. I told myself it was just another traveler stretching their legs, maybe taking in the fresh air despite the storm. But a small, sharp instinct in me said something was off. Lightning flared across the sky, a blinding flash that turned the wet pavement into a silver mirror. In that instant, I saw the figure more clearly, tall, thin, their clothes dark and clinging from the rain. Something hung from their hands, long, shapeless, swaying slightly in the wind. Then the light faded, and the rain swallowed the details again. I turned my head quickly to look directly, but the space beside the sedan was empty. My skin prickled as I scanned the lot. The lights flickered again, and for a split second, the shadows on the pavement seemed to shift unnaturally, like something had moved just out of sight. I locked my doors without thinking, the click of the mechanism loud in the confined space. My breathing had gone shallow. I tried to push away the creeping thought that I was being watched. Maybe the figure had simply walked around to the other side of their car, out of view. That would make sense. That would explain it. But then I saw it. On the wet concrete just outside my driver's side door, a single, fresh footprint. Large, dark, and facing my car. And that's where I froze, my hand still hovering near the door lock, my pulse pounding so loudly it seemed to echo inside my skull. The rain kept falling, but in that moment, I could barely hear it over the steady, growing thump of my heartbeat. I stared at the footprint through the glass, trying to understand how it could be there. The rain was heavy enough to erase anything on the ground in seconds, yet this print was sharp and dark, as if it had been pressed into the concrete just moments ago. The edges were clean, the shape almost too defined, like it hadn't been made by a normal shoe. My mind kept repeating the same question: how could it still be there? I forced my eyes away, scanning the lot again. The space near the black sedan was still empty, and the car itself hadn't moved. The trees beyond swayed in the wind, their branches bending and creaking, but I couldn't see anything between them. A shiver crawled along my spine, and I realized my breathing had become shallow and uneven. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather slick beneath my palms from the dampness clinging to my skin. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe the footprint was old, made earlier when the rain wasn't as heavy. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Something about it felt wrong, too deliberate, too perfectly placed. I decided to start the car and get back on the road. I twisted the key in the ignition. The engine gave a low, rough sputter before going quiet again. My stomach sank. I tried again, pressing harder on the gas this time. But the same sound rattled through the cabin before dying out completely. I glanced at the dashboard. Everything else seemed fine: the lights, the battery. There was no reason for it to fail. No reason except for the thought I didn't want to consider. That maybe I wasn't meant to leave yet. I checked the mirrors again, more urgently this time. Nothing. No figure, no movement, just the rain. I exhaled slowly, trying to quiet the rush of panic in my head. My eyes drifted back to the spot where the footprint had been. It was gone. Not washed away, gone. The patch of concrete was now completely dry, as if the rain wasn't touching it at all. That made no sense. I wiped at the glass to get a clearer view, but the image didn't change. A dry, clean shape in the middle of the soaked pavement, where only seconds ago there had been a footprint. The hair on my arms lifted, a cold ache running through my chest. My eyes moved back to the black sedan. For the first time since I'd arrived, I noticed something else. Its windshield was completely clear. No water streaking down it despite the rain hammering everything else. I couldn't stop looking at it. The way it sat there, unmoving, yet somehow too clean, too untouched by the weather. My mind kept searching for an explanation, but all I felt was a growing certainty that something about that car was wrong. I grabbed my phone, forgetting for a moment that I had no signal, and tried anyway. The call failed instantly, the screen dimming before my eyes as if the battery had drained, though it had been nearly full just minutes earlier. I set it down, my hands trembling, and glanced up at the mirror again. That's when I noticed the sedan's trunk was now slightly open. It hadn't been before, I was sure of it. The gap was small, but enough to see the darkness inside. Rain should have been pouring into it, yet nothing moved in that black space. No drops, no reflections, nothing at all. It was as if the inside of the trunk was separate from everything else around it. A flicker from the lights above pulled my gaze upward. They buzzed softly before dimming for a split second. And in that moment of near darkness, I thought I saw movement near my own car, a shadow that wasn't mine, sliding across the wet ground toward the driver's side. I turned quickly to look out the window, my breath catching, but the space was empty. The rain blurred everything beyond a few feet, turning the world into a shifting mess of shapes and motion. I leaned closer to the glass, searching. That's when I saw it, another footprint, this time directly in front of my car's hood, fresh, dark, facing me. The rain fell harder, but it didn't fade. It stayed there, stark against the wet pavement, as if waiting for me to notice. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something was closer, and not close enough that if I stepped outside, I wouldn't be alone. I stayed perfectly still, staring at the footprint in front of the hood, almost afraid to even blink. The world outside was blurred by the rain, yet that print looked as sharp and deliberate as the first one I'd seen. Water streamed down the windshield, but none of it seemed to touch that spot on the ground. It was too perfect, too precise, as if the rain was avoiding it on purpose. My eyes darted upward, scanning the area around it. The black sedan sat motionless in the distance, its trunk still slightly ajar. The trees behind it swayed in the wind, their shadows stretching unnaturally long under the flickering lights. I kept thinking about the figure I'd seen earlier, the way they'd stood beside that car, the way they'd seemed to be watching me. If they were still here, they were hiding now. I told myself I needed to get out, check the engine, maybe even walk toward the building for help. But the thought of opening my door felt wrong, like stepping into a trap. My hand hovered over the handle, but my body refused to move. Every instinct told me that once I left the safety of the car, I wouldn't be able to get back inside. The rain intensified, pounding the roof in heavy bursts. I leaned forward to get a better look at the footprint again, but my breath caught when I noticed something new. A second footprint had appeared, this one a few inches behind the first. As if something or someone was walking slowly toward me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. The distance between the two prints was too short, almost as if the steps were being taken unnaturally close together. They weren't the strides of someone moving quickly. They were deliberate, patient, measured. A sudden flash of lightning lit up the lot, and for the briefest moment, I saw more of them, several prints forming a crooked path from the far edge of the lot straight toward my car. When the light faded, they were gone again, leaving only the two that had been there before. My pulse was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The sound of the rain shifted suddenly, as if something large had moved just outside. I turned slowly toward the driver's side window, and for a second, I thought I saw a shadow pass along the glass. I blinked hard, but there was nothing there. My phone sat dead in the Q folder, its black screen reflecting my own pale face. I thought about trying the engine again, but a small voice inside told me it wouldn't matter. Whatever was happening here wasn't mechanical. A low hum began to fill the air, not from my car, but from somewhere outside. It was faint at first, like the sound of distant machinery, but it grew steadily louder, vibrating through the ground beneath me. I couldn't pinpoint its direction. It felt like it was coming from everywhere at once. Then the lights above the lot began to dim and flicker again. This time, they didn't come back to full brightness. The shadows stretched farther, melting into one another, until it felt like the edges of the parking lot were no longer there. The hum stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Even the rain seemed to soften, as if muffled by something unseen. I glanced back toward the black sedan, and my stomach turned cold. The trunk was now fully open. The darkness inside seemed deeper than before, swallowing the light around it. I stared at it, unable to look away, and in that void, I thought I saw movement, a shifting, formless shape that made my eyes ache to focus on it. It wasn't stepping out, it wasn't folding, stretching toward me in a way that didn't seem possible. My hand instinctively went to the ignition again, twisting hard. The engine sputtered, coughed, then went dead, leaving me in near silence. I looked back toward the trunk. It was closed. But in the space between me and the sedan, another footprint had appeared. This one was so close I could see the water beating on its surface. The direction was unmistakable. It was facing the driver's door. I couldn't take my eyes off the footprint. It was too close now, no more than a few feet from where I sat. The sight of it made my chest tighten, a sharp pressure building under my ribs. I could almost feel something on the other side of the glass, standing in that exact spot, staring in at me. My hands stayed frozen on the steering wheel even though I knew they wouldn't do anything to protect me. The rain hammered the roof, the sound bouncing in my skull like static. My breath fogged the glass, and I tried to wipe it away with my sleeve, but my hand was trembling so badly I only smeared it more. I leaned forward, squinting into the blur outside. The rest of the lot seemed empty, the distant tree line swaying with the wind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer the one doing the watching. I slowly turned my head toward the black sedan. It hadn't moved, but now every detail of it seemed sharper, like my mind was forcing me to notice things I'd missed before. The paint looked unnaturally smooth under the rain, as if it wasn't wet at all. The glass was too dark to see through, yet I had the overwhelming sense that something inside was looking back. Then, without warning, the sedan's brake lights flickered once. Not long enough to be a signal, just a brief, blood-red glow in the downpour. I jerked in my seat, my pulse racing, but the lights didn't come on again. The car remained still. A sudden metallic tapping made me whip my head toward the passenger side window. It was faint, almost delicate, but rhythmic, like fingertips brushing against the glass. My mouth went dry. I leaned just far enough to glance at the window, but there was nothing there, only rivulets of rain racing downward. I waited, barely breathing, and after a few seconds, the tapping came again. This time it sounded lower, closer to the door handle. I gripped the ignition and twisted it out of sheer panic. The engine made a grinding noise, then fell silent. I twisted again, harder, but the result was the same. My heart thudded painfully as I realized the noise outside had stopped. I didn't want to look. Every muscle in my body screamed not to, but slowly I turned my head toward the driver's side mirror. It was too dark to see clearly, but I caught a faint outline of figure standing just at the edge of the mirror's reflection. They were angled toward the car, their heads slightly tilted, as though studying me. The moment I focused on them, they stepped backward into the shadows and vanished from view. The air inside my car felt heavier, harder to breathe. My chest rose and fell in quick, shallow bursts. I glanced toward the building, thinking I could make a run for it, but the idea of stepping out into that open space made my skin crawl. Still, staying here felt worse. I reached for my flashlight in the glove compartment. My fingers closed around the cold metal and I clicked it on, aiming the beam toward the footprint in front of the car. The light cut through the rain in a narrow column, illuminating the wet ground. The footprint was gone. The beam trembled in my shaking hand as I swept it slowly across the lot. I caught glimpses of the pavement, the glistening puddles, and then just beyond the edge of the trees something pale. A face, motionless, staring. I froze, unable to move the light. The face was featureless from this distance, but I knew it was fixed on me. Then the beam flickered, dimmed, and went out completely, plunging me into darkness. I sat there in the silence, straining to hear anything beyond the rain, and then I did a sound I couldn't mistake. Wet, deliberate footsteps, circling the car. They moved slowly, pausing between each step, as though whoever or whatever was out there wanted me to know they were close. The steps stopped by the driver's door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it, 3 slow, deliberate knocks against the glass, each one echoing inside me like a heartbeat. When I finally looked, there was nothing outside the window, but in the reflection on the wet glass, I could see a shape behind me. I didn't move, I didn't even breathe. My eyes stayed locked on the window, but I wasn't looking outside anymore, I was staring at the reflection. The shape behind me was faint, distorted by the raindrops streaking the glass, but it was there, tall, unmoving, its head just low enough to be level with mine. I couldn't make out its face, only a darker shadow where the features should have been, as if the light itself refused to touch it. Every part of me screamed to turn around, but some deeper instinct told me not to. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, my fingernails digging into the leather. My heart was pounding so loud I half expected to hear it echo back from the figure in the reflection. I blinked once, just to clear the water from my eyes, and when I looked again, the shape was gone. My breath came out in a shudder, but I didn't feel relief, only the crushing certainty that it hadn't gone far. My gaze darted to the rearview mirror, then the side mirrors. Nothing. The car's interior was empty. That was when I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, like damp earth, but heavier, almost metallic. It seemed to cling to the air, filling the space inside my car. I glanced at the vents, wondering if something from outside had blown in, but they were still closed. The odor grew stronger by the second, until my stomach churned and my throat felt tight. I cracked the window just an inch, hoping to let in some fresh air. The smell didn't fade, it intensified. The rain hit my face in cold needles, and I was about to roll it back up when I heard it, breathing not mine. Slow, measured breaths. So close it felt like they were right on the other side of the glass. I froze, my hands hovering over the controls. I didn't dare look, but the sound grew heavier, almost raspy, as if whoever was there was savoring the moment. Then it stopped. I slammed the window shut, my pulse racing, my chest tight. The world outside looked the same, empty still, except for the rain, but my body refused to believe it. I reached for the ignition one last time, turning the key until my wrist hurt. This time, the engine roared to life. Relief hit me in a dizzying wave, and I slammed the car into reverse, ready to tear out of there. But the gear wouldn't shift. I yanked harder, my hand slipping against the cold metal, but it was locked in place. I tried again, harder, but it wouldn't budge. My headlights cut across the lot, illuminating the black sedan. Only now it wasn't at the far end anymore, it was directly in front of me, just a few feet away. I couldn't have missed it moving. I would have seen it, heard it. Yet here it was, close enough that the rain sliding down its hood caught my headlights like silver veins. The trunk was open again, wider than before, and from where I sat, I could see only darkness inside. Not empty darkness, thick, shifting darkness, as if it was alive. The lights in the lot flickered again, but this time they didn't come back on. The only light left was from my own headlights, spilling across the sedan and the ground between us, and that's when I saw them. Footprints, dozens of them, appearing in the wet pavement one after another, moving toward my car in jerking, unnatural steps. They weren't forming a straight line, more like they were circling, closing in from all directions. I gripped the wheel, my breaths coming fast and shallow, every muscle in my body tight. The first print reached the driver's door. I heard it, then something brushing against the side of the car, almost like fingertips dragging along the metal. The sound traveled slowly toward the back, then around the other side, tracing the car's outline. My headlights flickered, dimmed, then cut out entirely, plunging me into absolute darkness. The sound stopped for a moment. The only thing I could hear was the pounding in my ears. Then a new sound filled the space, a slow, deliberate creak, coming from directly ahead. My eyes adjusted just enough to see the sedan's trunk lowering, as though someone was pulling it shut. Before it closed completely, I saw movement inside. A pale, thin hand reached out, stretching toward me, the fingers impossibly long. The trunk slammed shut, and everything went still. When the lights flickered back on, the sedan was gone. And so was my car. I was standing alone in the rain, my feet planted on cold, wet asphalt that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. In the distance, through the haze, I saw a single black sedan idling, its driver's door slowly opened, waiting.